Advocates in Ontario call for better protections for migrant workers from extreme heat. Crowding in women's jail in Saskatchewan is at a crisis level. Canada is set to apologize to 9 Dakota and Lakota nations for having declared them refugees in the past. Israel kills 90 Palestinians in Gaza who were in a designated safe zone, and potential candidates for upcoming Tunisian election face arrests. Good morning. It's Monday, July 15th. I'm Nora. Here are your headlines. Justice for Migrant Workers, an organization that advocates for the rights of migrant workers, penned an open letter last week to the Ontario government to bring in regulations that would protect migrant workers on farms from heat-related injuries. Parts of Ontario have been seeing consistent heat warnings over the past few weeks. The letter by the organization states that while the provincial government has made commitments last year to introduce legislation on the issue, it has yet to follow through. They are calling for regulations specific to the agriculture sector and better protections for workers so that they can issue complaints without fear of reprisal. Speaking to CBC, Chris Ramsaroop, an organizer with Justice for Migrant Workers, said this, quote, "We should not be waiting for another tragedy to occur where a worker is sick or dies because of heat conditions," unquote. Next, a jail for women in Saskatchewan is overcrowded at a crisis point, according to Nicole Obergavich, who's the executive director of the Elizabeth Fry Society of Saskatchewan. This organization offers support to incarcerated women and gender diverse people. Pine Grove Correctional Centre is designed to hold 166 inmates, but according to CBC News, as of Friday, it was holding 227 people. 90% of the people being held are Indigenous. The provincial government says that most of the people in jail are being held temporarily awaiting trial or bail. The CBC News article about this story doesn't provide much detail about the conditions in the jail or the women being held there. It does mention that at one point the situation became so bad that beds were moved into spaces like the chapel, the gymnasium, and other visitor areas to make room for the people being held there. The rest of the article focuses on Obergavich's advocacy and her calls for better social programs, specifically surrounding the drug and housing crises. Next, the federal government is set to apologize to Dakota and Lakota nations in Manitoba and Saskatchewan for historically designating them as quote-unquote refugees, a label that's not only absurd but has had several consequences. The designation has meant that all levels of government have been able to deny members of those nations access to services and benefits. It also meant that they were not included in signed treaties and could not negotiate different land settlements. In 2007, Ottawa rejected the claim of the Dakota and Lakota nations, saying that they should be included in treaties and that they did not have the Indigenous rights to land because of the refugee designation. Now to international news, and first to Gaza, where an Israeli attack on a designated humanitarian zone over the weekend killed 90 people and wounded 300 more. The attack was one of the deadliest in weeks and included 4 different airstrikes on 4 houses. Israel said that the attack targeted Hamas commander Mohammed Deif and his deputy. In a press conference on Saturday after the attack, Benjamin Netanyahu said it wasn't clear if Deif had been killed in the attack. Hamas responded by saying that the notion that Deif was targeted was false and that those claims were aimed at justifying the attack, which killed, quote-unquote, defenseless civilians. This isn't the first time Israel has targeted designated safe zones. It's been doing that since October and will probably continue to do this, which is a clear and flagrant violation of international law. And you know what? I heard stories firsthand about what it was like to live under the Israeli assault for the last 8 months. I heard from my friends what it was like to go to bed every night and not being sure if you'd survive the night. The sounds of constant bombardment, of constant drones, of living in a situation where you don't know if you're going to survive the next day, created the conditions for my friends' families to always sleep in the same bed in case a rocket does hit them and they could at least die together. It's this kind of thing that we don't hear enough about in Canada, the human toll of what Israel is doing. And I wish that we did hear more of these stories because, I don't know, maybe we would be able to change more political minds, but I'll leave it at that. And, you know, of course, All eyes on Gaza. Stop. Don't stop watching Gaza. And finally, to Tunisia, where the country is gearing up for an election and where potential presidential candidates are being arrested or summoned to court. According to the Associated Press, several people who've declared their intent to challenge current President Kais Saied have been arrested on a variety of charges, some related to murder, fraud, or corruption. This is all part of the democratic backsliding that's been taking place in Tunisia since 2019. According to Amnesty International, over the span of a year, as of February, more than 20 political critics of Said's government have been arrested, detained, or convicted on charges. It's a far cry from the hope that the successful overthrow of dictator Zine El Abidine Ben Ali that the 2011 Arab Spring brought. Despite the clampdown, Said continues to be popular for his rhetoric that targets corrupt elites and foreign interference in domestic affairs. Those are your headlines for Monday, July 15th. I'm Nora. That's right. It's July 15th, already halfway through the month. We're already halfway through the month. Oh my God, I haven't paid a bunch of my bills. I better do that. You are listening to this podcast at sandynora.com, on the Real News Network podcast feed, and anywhere you get your podcasts. I hope you are listening to this podcast on the new feed. How can you tell? Well, I take the little DN for daily news out of the headline. And so if you're seeing the DN, you're still in the old Sandy Nora feed, make sure you switch to the new feed. It's a little hard to find, so I've actually added my name into the subheading so that you can see daily news, read to you by Nora Loretto, a podcast of Sandy Nora. I mean, it's all there. It might take some time for you to find it, but do try to switch over soon. You have until September. I hope you have a wonderful Monday, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.